everybody. It's Carl and Eric again. Say hi, Eric.
Oh, I was nodding vigorously.
Nodding vigorously.
Hello.
So we've been doing, welcome to Tabletop Tango again. So we've been doing a series on Pathfinder. I learned characters. I learned encounter.
Yeah, more specifically, it's Carl learns Pathfinder.
Carl learns Pathfinder. That's right.
Yes.
Eric teaches Pathfinder. Carl learns Pathfinder. So that's been a lot of fun so far, and we're going to do another episode just focused on Pathfinder. And what topics are we covering tonight? What are you going to teach me?
So we started getting into the kind of like different modes of play, which is kind of some of the three pillars of play. We already did encounter mode, and now we're going to cover exploration and downtime. And these are kind of the three modes that when you play the game, you're usually playing in one of these modes. And it's more about, we've talked about it before, it's more about like the time. Like it's kind of like coming out from encounter, like macro, like out, how much time.
So encounters close, or and then the exploration
encounters
is more
like seconds.
Kind of the dungeon.
Encounters like seconds. Exploration is anywhere from, minutes to hours to maybe even, it could be even days, honestly.
Sure.
And then downtime is more like in the weeks, basically.
Okay. Yeah, and that would round out kind of the whole study of the basic kind of resolution mechanics and actions and the things that you can do within the game. Yep.
And like when you think about it, like every single game that you're doing, you're usually doing it in one of these kind of things. They just don't like mechanically kind of quantify it, if that's the right word, but they don't like quite like really make it like, okay, this is this mode, this is this mode, this is this mode. But like anytime you play a tabletop game, it kind of changes whether you're like in a fight or you're kind of exploring, or it's like a long voyage, or you're hanging out for months, right? So
yeah, and when I noticed Pathfinder, a lot of the rules it's very prescriptive of what you can do during those periods of time, where a lot of games, especially the old school kind of games, there's not rules around those. It's just kind of, hey, they are, and you just kind of make it up yourself as you go along. So they focus mostly on the encounter, and everything else is a little left more to you to figure it out.
Yeah.
So very good. So you want to jump right into it? We don't have a detailed outline for this one, so we're going to wing it a little bit.
Yeah. And so like you said, they it's kind of the older games. I mean, even like say 5e, and you've played a little bit, but I mean a lot of games, right? Like Savage Worlds is pretty good about it, but a lot of games don't really like explain, like especially when you're talking about exploration or like dungeon crawling.
Right.
There's not. It's so kind of left up to the GM, and that can be good. It really depends what you want from it, but for kind of a more non-narrative game like 5e and this, I do feel like it's good that they put these out down there, because it actually makes it much faster. 5e, I often feel gets like kind of bogged down with like, making a ton of checks, for traps, like all the time, when you don't really need to do that. So
certainly,
let's talk about that. Let's talk about exploration mode.
Okay. Exploration mode. Okay, great.
Did you have any questions just up front?
Well, I sneak peek at the book. I'll have questions as you go along, but let's set the basis for, let's assume somebody's watched the episode kind of on encounters and understand there's actions and the roles and, sort of that kind of stuff. So let's just dive into what does it mean to be in exploration mode, and what does that entail?
So exploration mode is, as we said before, it's kind of when you need to measure something between like, when minutes to hours, maybe even days kind of matters. So these things all accompany like just straight traveling, usually. Just traveling from one place to another, right? That's going to be exploration. Like dungeon crawling, that's a very classic example, like going around on a map. You're not in combat, you're usually doing exploration. But this can also be stuff like, spending time in the town, like gathering information in the town, gathering information in like a library. Like honestly, the meat of the game, where like, most of the mechanics is in the encounter mode. Often you're spending your most time in this kind of exploration mode in most games, right? So this is kind of the most broad that you can do, but it mostly involves somebody, moving around in a space. But it can even be like, like a day of um, uh, like political intrigue. That could be exploration mode. So like I said, it's very open. It's just kind of what happens between encounters, and like long periods of time.
Right.
Um, so like speaking of travel, they do give a mechanic here for travel speed. But again, we don't really need to get into that. It's so the way it works for this now. There is some open creativity here. Like you can often kind of do different things. You just have to tell the GM, and they'll either like prescribe, oh, that's this type of action, or come up with something. There are like very the main ones that they've put down in the book. And then there's also like any other kind of skill actions. Remember we talked about all the skills have like different actions under them.
Yep.
So most of those can be used in exploration mode. Now, pretty much like I think across the board, if you do most of the things, it's going to cut your movement in half. So if you're not just like traveling normally, you're going to have like half your speed. That's pretty much true for most of the things that you do. Because, it's like you're not just walking, It's like if you're walking and looking at your phone, you're not going to be walking as fast probably. So it's like that kind of
and there's assumption that your attention is beyond just motion, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Especially,
so
in a dungeon, we'll have
are,
actions where we're trying to do things related to looking for what's ahead of us as opposed to just barreling along willy-nilly, right? Got it.
So let's talk about that now. So let's talk about like the main things.
Yep.
So the first thing that's a lot of people do is avoiding notice. Which, under stealth, they're sneaking and hiding, but this is the specific exploration activity called avoiding notice. And that's you being sneaky. So you basically like attempt a stealth check, and you move at half speed. And this is not like when you're in an encounter, you're usually using stealth like all the time. I mean, we might even make a video later about sneaking and some of that stuff, about more of the specifics. But this, you kind of just have to roll one, and you just kind of are using that, for your exploration. Like instead of rolling all the time, right?
So this is kind of your stating an intent. I'm trying to move more. I'll use the term stealthily, but it's more so I'm not as noticeable. I'm trying to stay quiet. I'm trying to, not just barrel on. But that you describe that intention, and then that gets
you're just doing that,
and then
right?
that's what you're
like
doing.
You're just doing that,
right?
Yeah, and you don't need to like necessarily like always like, okay, I make a stealth check, like I go behind this cover and this cover. It's just like you're traveling through, you're sneaking. So you do it's at half speed. Now stealth has a good feat for this. They talk about it in the book called Swift Sneak. This is a skill feat, which would eventually allow you to move at full speed while doing this. And there's definitely a couple of classes that get bonuses to certain things of these, but yeah. And then so it also allows you when you're doing avoid notice, that gives you that automatic. Remember we talked about before how initiative has kind of like variable skills. You don't always have to use perception for initiative.
Right.
This is kind of the main way for you to be able to roll stealth for initiative. And when you roll stealth for initiative, you actually use that roll also to like against the perception DC of enemies to see if you're hidden or not.
Right, got it.
So it kind of has so yeah, if you're a rogue, you generally want to be doing this. Now, most of these, you can only do one of these at a time. So you can't be sneaking and like looking for traps. That's something very important to know. Now, he did say there is some like, I think there's some class feats and skill feats that allow you to do some of these things. Like they don't take your whole action basically. But most of these, like you can't be all sneaking and looking for traps, right?
Makes sense.
You're kind of focusing on the one thing.
Sure, makes sense.
So that's avoid notice. We have defend. Defend is just you have your shield up. So you start the encounter with your shield raised. And I don't know if we talked about this before, but everybody has access. Now, this is something that everybody has access to. Is called raise a shield. Raise a shield. Anybody can do it, from the wizard to the fighter. It doesn't matter. It's if you have a shield in your arm, you raise your shield, and you get its AC bonus as a circumstance bonus to AC. So usually shields have like a +2. So you get that +2 bonus to AC. Now, some people have something that's called a shield block. And I'm just kind of putting this in there because we're talking about it now.
You keep going. Keep going.
Okay. So a shield block, which is which allows you to like, when somebody hits you, you kind of take some of that damage. I just wanted to quickly just throw that in there. But so defend is that everybody, you're just having your shield raised while you're exploring. So when you start an encounter, you automatically have that up. So you get that bonus to AC. If you're just kind of worried that combat's going to happen, you can be like, well, I'm defending, and if an encounter starts and I don't roll higher than an enemy, I get that bonus.
Okay.
That's defend. Detect magic. That's a cantrip. They kind of put it here specifically because.
So the idea is that
it kind of needs a little bit more minutia.
Wizard or whoever is detecting magic
constantly
as they go along. Yeah. Okay.
Now there is some rules about like using a cantrip for too long. You can't use it. I think it's like more than 10 minutes at a time or an hour. I don't remember the specifics. But basically, they wanted detect magic to be in there specifically because basically it's like if you travel, it's about like how fast you're traveling. You have like no chance of missing a magical aura within your 30-foot range. So they have some more rules about that. Now we're coming to a very interesting.
That seems that might take some of the, complexity out of, deciding when's the best time to be casting these spells. You're just declaring, I'm doing it.
Well, yeah, because again, it's not like you're doing it all the time, but you can't do cantrips. I believe, I don't know where it's listed, but I think it's like 10 minutes or like an hour or something. It's one of those.
So there's a limit to it. So it's not.
There is a limit that you can't. It would like tax you too much to constantly proc a cantrip. So it is very taxing. Here we come to a very interesting one. This is kind of unique. In this game, I haven't really seen it other places, and I like it a lot. It's called Follow the Expert.
Follow the Expert. Okay.
It has a bunch of tags with it, but just to really, very basically, it's a way for other people to kind of use somebody's expertise to get bonuses. And when we're talking about exploration, this is for like a long kind of, this is for like a long-term activity that somebody's doing. So a very good example is sneaking or like climbing, right?
Right.
These are like long. So like, think of it this way, like you guys all need to climb a cliff.
Right. And
it's like, oh, here comes Carl who doesn't really know how to climb. And he's like, oh,
but you got someone else who's a great climber.
You have a rock climber.
Expecting is that they're going to help rope them up and do all that sort of stuff.
And you're kind of watching what they do. So the really cool thing about this is that, so this is your whole action, right? You can only do kind of one of these things at a time. But basically, in the game, in the book, it's written a little weird. But if you are untrained, then you can add your level as a proficiency bonus. So remember we talked about proficiencies, right, where once you're proficient, you get to add your level. If you're untrained, you don't get to do that. So if you're untrained in the skill, you get to add your level as a proficiency bonus
because you're following the leader, right?
Because you're following the leader, and then. So in the book, it's kind of a little deceptive. It seems like people can use, even if they are like trained or an expert, they can use their level on top of it. No, you just get your level once. It's written a little weird. I think they errated it or something. But and then additionally, you also get a circumstance bonus, based on your ally's proficiency.
Okay.
So it's not like, so remember, if your ally proficiency level is like trained expert, so if your ally is expert, which remember, so I didn't say this, they have to at least be an expert for you to follow the expert.
Oh, so they can't just be proficient.
Follow the expert. They can't just be trained. They have to be at least an expert. But they get another, everybody will get, so even if you are trained, so say you were trained in sneaking,
right,
and I was an expert,
okay,
you would get a +2 bonus, circumstance bonus because I'm an expert. And then master is 3, legendary is 4. So it's kind of good for most people if they're not at least an expert.
So that gives a lot of opportunity because we've got people who will be, as we talked about originally, you can't get expert in that many areas. So it gives you a chance that as long as you're spreading that out throughout the party, who's got expertise in different areas that might pertain to, I don't know, let's say dungeon delving, if that's what your guys are about. You can take advantage of that. So having people who have a variety of skills in the party obviously makes it work a lot better for that.
Yeah, obviously. It's really good. I mean, and most of this is like with stealth, probably. That's like the main thing that's used for this. But it's you can use it for anything that you can think of that's kind of like somebody's doing something that we all need to do. Like it could be, like I said, rock climbing, right? Athletics. It could be balancing somewhere.
Well, it could be, trying to get through a stepping stone trap or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So
like anything that you can think of like that. Exactly. Now I want to just point out while we're here, is that because we're talking about stealth is probably the main thing that this is used for. There's actually a really, really helpful skill feat, and that's good for it's called Quiet Allies. And what it's about is that if you have this and you're the expert in stealth, that when other people are using Follow the Expert on your stealth, only the person with the lowest roll has to roll for like a group stealth check. You might think, oh, that's not that great, but when you think about it, like you have a much better chance of just one person rolling and getting a good than like a lot of people rolling. So it's actually an excellent skill feat. I just wanted to throw that out there while we're here.
So it turns
it's much
into
better than it seems.
Closest ball golf match.
yeah, exactly. So moving on. Unless you had some more questions.
No, I think that hits on a couple of those key areas for sure. I mean, that makes total sense.
Okay. Yeah.
So what other things can we do?
It makes sense. Then we have hustle, which is basically when you want to double your travel speed. So there's a travel speed, and there's a chart on page 479 that basically means that like whatever your kind of normal speed is, they give you a miles per hour or miles per day kind of. That's like your travel speed. That's how much you can move in a day.
So for those scenes where the Gimli and the elf are running across the hills, we're going to be using hustle.
Yeah, or like just traveling from whatever one city to another city through the forest, whatever. Yeah. Hustle allows you to increase your travel speed, and it's usually equal to your like you can only do it for a certain amount of time, equal to your Constitution modifier.
Makes sense.
So if everybody's doing it together, you use the lowest con modifier in the group. So it's basically just a way of we need to hurry, right?
Yep.
Investigate.
Now, well, hold on. Now, is there penalties that come along with that get applied when you're doing things like, you're doing it within where there's a trap or there's an ambush or where there's, it's kind of the opposite of I'm stealthing through. I'm just rushing through. So
remember, if you're hustling, you're not searching for traps.
No, but I mean people who are, exactly. So you're not searching for traps. So there's just you just hit them. There's no. But like for people who are ambushing you or need to notice you or what have you. So.
Well, there is certain feats like rogues get some feats and some other classes get like trap finder feat, and there is like some ranger feats that help them with covering trap. Like so, some of the classes have things where they get like either they can do it for free or they get it kind of automatically. So some of the classes can kind of get around that. But generally, if you're hustling, right, you're not really paying attention around you, and it's kind of up to the GM to maybe if you guys have to make a perception check. He might do a penalty on that or something.
All right, but that's kind of it's not codified in the game. It's more GM discretion for that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean the codifying. I don't know if you say it like that. Is more like that you can't do another action.
Okay.
While doing it. So, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's anything else. Investigate, which is investigate is kind of where you use recall knowledge. And it's a secret check about just pretty much just going around like whatever clues are around you. So it's just you like it's you just saying I want to like make sure I'm checking things out and like gathering information from them, and that would be investigate.
So now that's
usually what happens.
Oh, I was going to say. So is this what when I'm searching the room, I'm going to search the room, investigate comes into place, or is that something else?
I mean. If somebody's like, okay, you describing you going to a room and they talk about a painting, right? That's just like, and so you like, okay, what's this painting? They would have you make a recall knowledge check. These things are more like for like you're wandering around. You're saying, I'm just spending my time like checking things out, right? Like I'm like if there's anything that like comes out to me like an arcane symbol or a painting that like that this is.
Right, and
it's pretty much like anything that would recall. Like you're looking for clues in an area. You're saying, "I'm investigating." So if you know somebody like escaped,
and that's what I was trying to get to because old school. It's tell me how you're doing things, what you're looking at, and here it's saying as part of the rules, I'm just stating I have an intent that I'm looking at things more carefully than
Yeah.
maybe someone else. And so in that regard, it's no longer, oh, if the player looks up and to the left, they'll see the special symbol, and the player has to tell me I'm looking up. How
Yeah,
you search
that's always
it's not
I
that at
hate
all.
that. I,
Well,
I
that's old
honestly hate
school, right?
that
That's
when
old school for
it
sure.
is old school, and like GMs still do it, but it's like it's kind of ridiculous. Like this is such theater of the mind, and even a map is so
Oh yeah, yeah.
limited.
No, I'm
Like
with you.
it's not the same as us. Like it's like you just have to assume that the characters in that room are like checking everything out. It's like having it be a trigger of like, oh, make sure they look under the bed. It's like no, just they're checking out the whole room.
I agree.
Let them look under the bed. Like you know what I mean? Like just have them roll, and if they hit that DC, like I think that's the way it should be played, right? Because it's like.
Well, I
always
think
thought that was
that's
silly.
what I do. So I was just making sure that is kind of where they're coming from, because I know Pathfinder has its roots farther back into the history of D&D than like fifth edition, right? I mean,
yeah, its roots are in 3.5.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
But they definitely took a lot. And then we move on to repeat a spell. Now this is just kind of like they put detect magic separately.
Okay.
This is just you're doing a spell at half speed. It's usually a cantrip. So something that like that can actually be the shield cantrip, say, right? Or dancing lights, which is you have to kind of move every round. It has to be 2 actions or fewer, and again, like you can't do this for like hours. You'll be fatigued otherwise. Some spells that have like longer, like say like 10-minute durations.
Okay.
You could maybe do like also like because it's like 10 minutes. I can maybe cast it more than once, or I can cast this cantrip over a long period of time.
But there's the concept of spell slots and using up spells. So how does that jive with?
Well,
I mean, I get if
cantrips.
it's cantrips, but how does it jive with something that's not a cantrip?
Well, if you had like I can't think of a spell off the top of my head, but if you had a spell that was like a low level spell and you were just wandering through an area and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep casting this, and it's like a 10-minute or an hour long duration. You might say like, however long it takes us, I'm just going to use these spell slots up for whatever reason, right?
But that's what you would do. You'd say, okay, I'm casting a spell.
Yeah, I'm repeating the spell.
It's going to take up, I'm going to use it for an hour. If nothing happens, I'll continue to use it, and then then we just keep burning spell slots. Okay, I was just wondering whether that was a way of, if there was something built into that concept that was different or unique, but it's not.
It's just kind of open. Yeah, it's just kind of open again. Then we move on to scout. This is an interesting one. Basically, it says, oh, you scout ahead, but pretty much you're moving at half speed. Like I said, most of these are half speed movements.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
And then when like an encounter happens, you give everybody a +1 circumstance bonus to initiative. So it's you just kind of being like, if there's somebody going to ambush us, and it's just like an automatic +1 because you're just like looking out for enemies. Now there is a lot of like rangers. There's a feat where you get this for free and give a bigger bonus, and there's a couple of other classes that get stuff like that, and like skill feats, I think. So this is just one that's just like an automatic +1. But like I said, there is some class feats that you can take that make this better, and like a free thing that you're like always doing.
So okay, go finish the thought, and then I'll jump in.
No, I'm done. What's up?
Well, so these are things that are again, you're stating an intent, and so let's say we've got a party and we're traveling, and the person who's kind of scout got that sort of role in the party says, "Oh, my action, I'm going to scout. That's what I'm doing."
Yeah.
A spellcaster says, for my action, I'm going to do detect magic. That's what I'm going to be doing while I'm doing this. And let's say someone else is doing something else, whatever. But for those two, how does that jive with the concept when you're doing things more descriptively, declaratively? You're saying, oh, well, the scout, I'm going up 50 feet ahead and I'm looking out and I'm doing things. Well, then he's going to hit whatever, let's say there's a magic trap that I would notice with the detect magic if he was with me. So these things, if you were doing it more in here's what I'm doing, here's how I'm doing it. Okay, we're doing this role. But since these are actions, everybody's declaring things they're doing. Is there something special to that? Or is that just, again, the GM has to, can't check their brain at the door. They have to say, well, this is probably what would have happened in that circumstance, or.
Yeah, I think it's definitely up to the GM. I think it's like you kind of have to shift. Like I've been in so many dungeon crawls where it was like exhausting, or it's like, oh, every action, oh, I look for traps in this hallway, I look for traps in this hallway, and it's kind of just like, okay, you're just looking for traps, right? I think it kind of depends on how they want this like dungeon exploration to go.
Okay,
I mean, some people might even use, unless somebody is kind of going off like you said. I think that would be different, right? If somebody's like, I want to go way ahead and make sure that there's nothing going on. But most of the time, the party's sticking relatively together. So, like, you could even use, like, a party token. You don't even have to use, like, everybody's tokens and move it. Because it's just, it's often kind of clunky. I like this because it's like, when you kind of do it that way, it's like, the party's together. You're declaring what you're doing. Let's just, like, move through this area.
So the concept, right? I think you've hit it, right? So the concept is the assumption is everybody's together and declaring things they're doing. And so if somebody's saying, I'm declaring, I'm looking for, I'm doing that detect magic, or I'm scouting, the assumption is the scout's not gone up way ahead. The scout's still kind of with the party, close enough that they're all kind of within range of each other, and they're just noticing stuff ahead of that. That makes total sense then, because if once they really are truly split, well, then you've got two different groups doing things.
Yeah,
got it. Okay,
and it's a separate thing.
Makes sense.
So people can always and then moving on to the last thing, which I think we've talked about a bunch, is search.
Search.
Search is like, secret doors, traps, hazards, blah blah blah. You're looking for secret stuff. You're looking for secret dangers or whatever. Again, it's half speed. And I believe it's secret perception checks. I'm pretty sure. 3 secret tricks to seek. Seek is the action.
So secret rolls
remember a lot of these.
So secret rolls are pretty much a thing in Pathfinder.
They're a huge thing in Pathfinder.
Okay, because there's
a lot of stuff is secret. And I'm like, sometimes I'm on the fence about them a little bit. Like, I understand why they're there, is because to kind of like cut out that like, incidental metagaming, I guess. But sometimes it's like good. I mean, Savage Worlds takes the opposite track, right? They want you to know that you can roll your die. And the funny thing is that Pathfinder does have these hero points that you always get at least one hero point starting. You kind of have a Benny at the beginning anyways. Right. So it's sometimes I played at a game where the GM's like, oh yeah, well, I'll roll it for you if you get crappy. He's like, do you want me to roll it for you if you get crappy? And it might be yes or something.
Okay.
So I think that some of these secret rolls, I think they kind of went too far. I think it's up to your table and your GM, but I would say you maybe cut back some of the secret rolls.
Because that's one of those debate points, in the gaming community. Do you do open rolls, secret rolls? So it's interesting that Pathfinder's taken an approach, picked it. It's part of the rule. This is the approach we expect people to take. Okay.
They took the harder line, and I understand it, because it's like, you're doing like, well, I'm searching for danger, and it's like, oh, you rolled a 2. Oh shit, I don't know. Maybe there's something out there still. I'm still gonna be cautious. But it's like, if your character, was like, oh, I looked, looking good, they would, walk forward. So
sure.
I understand why they did it.
Okay.
But yeah, search and search is another one that there's like skill feats that can be used to make it better, to make it, full speed. So like I said, there's definitely like, again, like we talked about with other things, those skill feats really help, and they mostly help with stuff in exploration mode. That's where the meat of those skill feats come into play.
Okay.
It's kind of making it easier, and there's class feats. Now, that's kind of what they're called, like, exploration activities, but skills, like a lot of skill actions can be used. So they give examples in the book, like cover tracks, which is the thing that you do anyways. It's gather information, decipher writing, sense direction, squeeze. So if you're on a map and you need to get through somewhere, you squeeze. So all of these things can be done in exploration mode too. Like a lot of those things.
Sure, but they're used as well. But there are things you're doing more in the moment as opposed to these broader.
They're not a full activity.
I'm searching as we do stuff. Okay, great. But now let's say you found something, and you're going to say, oh, now I might use a skill particular to, identifying, the origins of this artwork, because I've got a skill based on that. But the fact that I found it was part of sort of this broader activities set. Okay, I mean, that makes complete sense. So there's two pieces of that puzzle that kind of work together.
Yeah. And like I said before, those are like the activities. And again, those are the exploration activities. Those are mostly when you're like explore dungeon crawling, and like not just a dungeon, but like whatever, like that's when those are used really primarily for dungeon crawling.
Sure.
And then all the other kind of skill stuff, like that's just you could do that in a dungeon, you could do that in a city, you can do that wherever.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. So also under, unless you had any more questions.
No, I think we hit at least that part of it for sure.
Okay. The last thing that is kind of in this mode is the normal like resting and daily preparations. So yeah, that's also in these exploration mode.
Sure.
So there's no anybody who plays 5e, there's no short resting in this game. And I guess there kind of is, where focus points, you can spend 10 minutes to get focus points back. That's kind of a separate thing. But basically, we'll first talk about resting. So only once every 24 hours. You can't rest more than once every 24 hours. You do a long rest, which takes about 8 hours. You only get HP back equal to con times your level. So it's very little hit points back. But they do make healing in this game pretty generous. And all the games I've played in this game, we've never had a trouble healing out of combat. Like it's just there's skills and there's powers.
So you get less points back with your long rest. Healing works better though, but it's still slightly more deadly of a game. So all those things kind of work.
Yes.
Kind of in an interesting concert. So.
Yeah. So yeah, you only get that amount of healing back. And there's certain like conditions, like I think like fatigued or something. There's like certain conditions that are better once you've rested.
Okay, that makes total sense. Yeah.
Now there are rules for like if you're kind of sleeping, like you don't have any like a sleeping roll, or you're on like a rocks, or you're in, like you didn't take time to like build a shelter, you probably won't get a good rest, or you're fatigued. You might get half your stuff back. So basically,
so there's rules around how good of a night's sleep you got.
A bit. I mean, sleeping in armor is a big no-no. If you sleep in armor, you'll get fatigued. If it's not padded armor, basically, you'll get fatigued. Just kind of common sense things, right? You're not like people don't sleep in full plate. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So once you've rested for about 8 hours, you don't actually get any of your other stuff back yet. Then you have to do what's called your daily preparations, which takes around an hour. And you can only do your daily preparations if you've fully rested, and you can only do it once per day. This allows you to like spellcasters get all their spell slots back.
Right.
Stuff like anybody with like alchemists or things like the alchemists get infused reagents back. Focus points all come back. You can don all your armor and like your shield and all your weapons. You get that all prepped. You can also, and you actually every single day. So unlike 5e where you attune for something kind of permanently, in this game you have to actually invest all your stuff to get the benefits for the day.
What you mean invest into your magic item?
Yeah, and you have 10 slots to invest. And I believe you have to do that once per. Pretty much when you invest something, it's only for the day.
So if you got a bunch of magical stuff, you get to decide what magical stuff you're going to plan on using that day, and then the rest of it is not available.
Yeah, I believe it only lasts for the day, and then you have to have that rest. So if you haven't been rested, let me just make absolutely sure.
So do things like potions and rings and stuff like that all count for your 10 slot, or are we talking
potions
weapons?
don't. Anything you're wearing primarily. So weapons don't require investments.
Oh.
Even magical weapons, but magical gear that you wear all have to be invested.
Okay, now but in 5e, weapons had to be attuned to you too, right?
Sometimes it depends. 5e is kind of hinky. It depends on like the power. Sometimes rings don't like it. Really, it's all over the place.
Okay.
This is pretty much anything that you wear that's magical has to be invested. Let me just make sure.
Okay.
You can ask me another question while I'm looking. But
well, so it's basically every 9 hours. Every 9 hours you can, within a 24-hour period.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So
you're up to snuff. Okay.
Yeah, the investors are last until you remove the item. So it's just kind of like you can invest in the morning. That's when you're actually able to invest.
Okay.
Is in that daily preparation. So you can't just get a magical item and like pop it on right away.
Okay.
and you can change things around, like you said. Cool.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. So once a day, you can spend enough time to get ready to use that magic item. You need 8 hours sleep to get the hit point back. Then you can do an hour preparation.
Like just your morning
which is your morning routine. But you can't do that unless you had the full rest, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. Makes sense. Makes sense. So, as Gary said, timekeeping is necessary for a real good campaign. But okay. So we're gonna keep track of 24-hour cycles so that we know when people can rest or not.
It's in other games. I mean, like 5e has their mechanic. It's a little bit more loosey. I think in this, it's pretty much just 24 hours. You can rest one. It can't just be like, we took damage, we're now long resting. But like I said, healing in this game is much more generous. The basic treat wounds from the medicine skill, I believe, is once per hour.
Well, still,
that they can be done on you.
What still is cool.
That's a good. Yeah.
This is will make dungeons more interesting. Even though there's good healing, it's you really have to. You can't do I go a room and then I retreat and lick my wounds. I go a room, I retreat, lick my wounds. You got to make decisions. I like that. I mean, I personally actually like that. You're not doing a couple of fights and then, oh, that was a hard day. Let's, we're 2 hours into the day. It's time to take a nap. Let's go to bed.
Spellcasters will not be getting their slots back. But the cool thing with this mechanic, again, they don't have short rests, but like, most spellcasters and anybody can, because of how open the system is and the character creation, you can have access to focus abilities. So most spellcasters, at the very least, will go into combat with like 1 or 2 focus points and be able to kind of get off one spell. I remember when you played your character,
I was going to say
you had you had some focus abilities, right?
I had
so I think you used it once. You had like a flick, like an elemental.
Yeah, I could
like a one action
fling water or something like that at somebody.
Yeah.
And it was used because it took a particular action, and we added another action, and we were able to do a couple things. So it was pretty cool. But yeah, I definitely had an area of focus that I could just use.
Yeah. And that, like, you spend 10 minutes to refocus, you get that back. So, and like I said, remember, healing takes treat wounds actually takes 10 minutes to do. It's not just instant. So there is no short rest, but 10 minutes is kind of a short rest, if that makes sense. Like 10 minutes, people can do things like that, and you can refocus.
And I mean, and that makes sense. 10 minutes is, I could see that more, it's basically you're taking a breather. Right.
Yeah. So. You're taking a breather, and yeah. So
okay,
cool. If you have any other questions, we can move on to the downtime mode.
All right. So we should summarize a little bit. So that hits the big parts of the exploration mode, which is we have these actions we declare, things like we want to hurry. What is it called? Hustle. We want to hustle. We want to search. We want to be detecting magic as we go along. So we kind of define those, and those are things that you can do as a party. Pick them up. There's the skills that come along with that you're also using for sure.
Yeah.
And then we've got the concept of to really get rest and really recover things. You need 8 hours. You can do it once every 24 hours, and then you have a period of time after that when you prep for the day, spells, magic items, getting ready to use them and that sort of thing. So. It makes sense. It's much more explicit in how these things work than some games are, right? They just assume the skill part of it, right? And you're doing things, and it's like, well, you walk far enough, I might need to make a stealth roll because let's find out. Here, I'm trying to be stealthy, and oh, by the way,
that's what you're doing.
Yeah. I've got follow the expert on for these others, so they're more stealthy too, and we're just doing a couple of rolls, and it's good to go.
Yeah,
all right,
exactly.
Awesome. All right, so now one thing very few games do is, at least the ones I've seen, is talk a lot about downtime and give you specific rules for things that happen outside of the game.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that Pathfinder has that. So let's go ahead and jump into that for sure.
Cool. Yeah, so downtime. Downtime is, now they have, in the book, they have some examples, but there's a little bit more in there, just like how they talked about these exploration activities and there's more skill for it. But we'll go through this. So they have something called long-term rest, which is basically you're just getting more healing back. When you have more time to rest, it's con times double your level. So
if you're in town and you're spending 4
because
days
you're spending
recovering,
all day resting. Yeah, you're just spending all day resting, kind of. Now here's a big thing in this game, which I love, and I find it important. When you have a game that just has so many options as this does for character creating,
right.
Is retraining. Now, retraining can be abused. I think GMs kind of either love it or hate it. But you can be kind of stricter with this than you can be kind of looser or stricter. But it's based on the GM kind of. But retraining is basically a way of you switching out, decisions that you've made in your advancements. So that's stuff like class feats, skill feats, or pretty much any feat. Skills that you've learned, and then even some class features. Now, there's some stuff that cannot be retrained. So, like, most feats can be retrained, but some ancestry feats, like if you have an ancestry feat that's like you have, unnaturally sharp teeth, or you have like a claws, right? You can't all of a sudden not have claws. So right. A lot of feats that are like that, like physical, and these are mostly only for ancestry things, that are like physical things about your body.
Sure.
Sometimes they kind of state that you can, like if it was one that where you like sharpened your teeth, but you can't really retrain them out or into them because it's like you kind of just have to have them, right?
So I'm making sure I understand that. So there's a downtime concept where you can trade out feats and say, I don't want this feat anymore. I want a different feat.
Not just feats, but feats, skills, or class. So we'll go through this. So we'll talk about feats. So exactly like you said, you can trade out. So you say level 2, you took a class feat. I'm trying to think off my head. Okay, a rogue level 1 took the Trap Finder feat, and you're like, you know what? I don't like Trap Finder. I want to take I forget what it's called, like this dodge feat, which allows me to add +2 to AC when I get hit. So you can do that. Now they talk about in the book that it's kind of up to the GM whether you can just kind of do it, or you need like a teacher, or you need to pay money, or you need like special things.
Okay.
It's kind of up to the GM based on the nature of it. But generally with feats, it takes about 2 weeks. So you have to use 2 weeks of downtime per feat.
2 weeks of downtime to forget a feat and get a brand new one. That would seem like that'd be something harder or more time consuming.
Well,
but
it's not as big. Again, it's kind of up to the GM. But we're talking about feats and skill feats. So feats, class feats, skill feats, ancestry feats, they're kind of just like 2 weeks. To kind of you just switching one thing around. Now there is a specific thing with this is that
it's one thing per downtime.
One thing at a time per 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
But now you can't so sometimes there's like feat chains. So you have taken one feat, like you were able to take this 6th level feat because you took a certain 4th level feat. Now you have to retrain both of those. You have to have enough time to retrain both of those.
So someone can't try to min-max by going, I've passed that, so now I'm just going to kind of pull that one out of the.
Absolutely, you cannot just pull that one out. No, and then to what I was saying, you can't also if you retrain a 4th level, say a feat that you took at 4th level,
right?
You can only trade that out for like another 4th level feat or a 2nd or a 1st level feat. Like you can't take that for a 6th level feat now. You have to take it for something that you would have been able to take
something that's equivalent at the same kind of level.
At the same time. And like I talked about, if there was a prerequisite that you didn't have at that level, you can't also take something that makes sense. Like you have to, if you went back in time when you were taking your 4th level feat, it has to be something that you could have taken. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The only thing I would say that say that it was like an uncommon feat, like you needed to be at a special school and you were now at that special school, then you could do it. It's not like, back 5 months ago, I wasn't at this school. So it's like now that you're at a school, you get access to that special thing.
Okay.
So if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense.
Okay. So that's feats. Skills are kind of the same thing. You can kind of, I think skills only take a week. They take the smallest amount of time. So you can lower, so if you have stealth at master, you can lower it to expert and then bump up, something you can use that to kind of become trained in something, or become expert in something, or even become master in something if it was already
So
an expert.
it's one of those levels. If you drop a level in something, you can raise a level in something else.
In something else. Yeah. But you can't say, like, say if you were expert in something and you drop something down to train, and that you couldn't then use that to raise an expert skill up to master. Like, it's at the, like, if you dropped an expert skill down, the highest you could retrain it to is another expert skill, to 2 expert.
Yeah, you
can't go above that.
Right. They have to be, the old, when you're buying something, equal to or less than the price of the original purchase.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then then there's class features. So sometimes class features like things like a wizard school, or like a druid, I think they're called school. They talk about it, druid order. So like if you were a order of the leaf, you might be able to change to an order of the storm, or whatever, the wild storm one, or a wild one. That's kind of more up to the GM, and that's the GM will kind of, it depending what you're doing, these take the longest, so at least a month, but maybe more. Because this is like a big fundamental change for your class.
Feels like if I was running this, if I was running a Pathfinder game, I would like increase all these times, because they all seem really low to me.
Yeah, I mean, but I would say there is so much stuff. It definitely helps. Like, I bet you could tell if somebody was like, kind of abusing this system. But if it's something that's like, oh, I really messed up, like I'm not happy with these decisions, then like, I mean, because like the downtime, you're spending like that whole 2 weeks doing this, right? And it's only for the one feat, like that you could have already taken. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of up to you. You're the GM, but I do think it's fair personally. It's just kind of, you can't just let them do it willy-nilly. Like, they have to have a reason, and then you might say, oh, you have to pay money,
right,
to have training. So it is what it is.
Sure.
That's the main downtime. Now there is other ones.
What about like stuff, making magic items, or
I was about to say
like
that. So those are specific skills. This was like the system, like systems, right? That don't really have a skill. So yeah, we have stuff. We have crafting.
So now we look at the things that the skills can provide. They have their own set of downtime things.
Crafting has their whole. We're not going to talk about crafting right now.
Yeah.
And honestly, crafting in this game, crafting is the worst part of the game. That's the weakest part of this game, hands down. And crafting isn't really good in any game. I mean, I've never played a game where I thought crafting was good. 5e has a horrid crafting system. Savage Worlds doesn't really. It doesn't have.
Savage Worlds doesn't worry about crafting, because everything's going to be the same even if you make it.
Yeah, it's like nothing. So, I mean, they do have a crafting system in here, which is good. It's just not great. I mean, as far as when you compare it to the other systems in the game, it's the weakest part of the game. But I do appreciate that it is still rather robust. Like, there is this big system in place for crafting. That's crafting, anything, magic items. There's the whole thing. We maybe talk about that in another video. They talk about create forgeries. That's, you're creating a forgery. That's hands down. Earning income. Now, this is the big thing.
Okay.
Earning income is like, the wizard learning new spells. Somebody else is retraining. The guy's crafting. You're like, well, I have nothing to do.
And the bard's going, I need to get myself some moolah. I got to get some coins in the purse.
So you're right. So earning income, it's usually done with crafting. So you can craft to earn income. As you said, performing. Performing is the other big one. And they're really cool. The third one of that is called the lore. So lore skills are pretty cool in this game. I like them a lot. They are, I think we talked about that in the character creation video, when you take a background. So remember, your lore was like, I think, art. It was like fine art,
yeah, something
right?
like that. Yep, because he was an artist before.
He was an artist. So you could either, when you downtime, you could either use crafting as a skill to do that, or you could use your lore skill. So it kind of gives it open to, everybody can use their lore. So say somebody had mercenary lore, they're like, oh, I'm going to go do mercenary work for these 4 weeks, whatever. And, you don't need to roll. It's just like you do roll for DC to get money, but it's kind of like, you're not really at risk of getting killed or whatever. It's just like you're rolling lore to make money. Now, part of the reason why the crafting is a little hinky is that you actually would make more money earning income by doing crafting, but then crafting and like selling the stuff that you would make because it costs money to make stuff.
Well, I would
But I
think
think
crafting. I don't know if we're talking crafting. I don't know, armors, magic items, what have you. I would think that'd be more as a game master. You'd want to make that as if you want something particular that you just can't get.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
worth something to you
Yeah.
because it's yours and you made it.
Yes.
So yeah.
And because you might, I was going to say that exactly. I think people miss the mark is that it's more about availability. That maybe, you know, it's depending how the GM's just like, oh, everything's available or not, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't, if magic's a little bit rarer and you're like, well, I want this magic item, well, the only way to get it is, or they only have like one rune at the store and you want more runes, then that's where crafting is good.
Right.
I think people look at it a little bit backwards.
Right. If you got the ye old magic shop where you guys come rolling into town with a +1 dagger and sell it, and if you need a +1 dagger, you just go buy it, then it's not really all that useful. And again, you can make more money by crafting things that you're selling that aren't those kind of things. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
But earning income, it's I guess it's like you just kind of doing that or working at a store or something.
What about the thieves and wanting to like steal coin purses all day, every day?
Now, I mean, that's something you could totally bring up to the GM. I mean, you could. I mean, that's something that I might say. I mean, you could say earning income. Like if you like, one of my characters has the underworld lore. I mean, that could be like an underworld lore. But I could definitely try to make an argument to the GM, like I want to roll thievery and pickpocketing this whole time.
Because literally every thief, that's what they want to do. You're in a tavern. Is there anything I can steal? You know, so I would see that be a downtime thing where it's everyone else is going out and performing to make money. He's going to case a joint,
picking
and rip
pockets
or
whatever. Yeah, I mean they do, like I said. So I have like underworld lore that can easily be done that way. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
There's also something called subsist. So subsist is if you're to kind of like, well, we have a month we need to survive in the forest, or a month we need to survive in a town.
Okay.
You kind of roll that using survival or society, depending, you know, if you're in the wilderness or in a city, and that's like you getting shelter and food. It's like instead of rolling again, you know, survival, you know, every single day or whatever, you kind of can just make an overall roll for stuff. And all these have more like rules when you go to the actual skill. So like subsist, they talk about it on page 240. I'll just so we can get a little bit more
240.
Details with this. Subsist, which is I think they have it as a general. They have it as a general skill. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of. I think it's. I was just trying to see like the time period. I don't actually really talk about that here. Anyways, whatever. So subsist is just you surviving in a place.
Right.
And then finally they have treat disease, which is just, it's more of a call out where like disease usually takes longer term medical care than just being wounded.
Right. So something equivalent to your hospitalization time that you need to cure yourself.
Somebody's sick, they have like a major weird magical flu, you know. They need to be in bed for 2 weeks or a month or something.
That makes sense.
Right. Then there's, you know, they just have like, I mean, that's like the main like codified ones.
Yeah.
But they just have like, you know, again, like they say, work with your GM on other ways you want to spend downtime. You need to pay for your cost of living, which could be, like you said, you want to be like, I want to pick pockets. Right. They also talk about like acquiring property, managing a business, becoming part of a guild. But pretty much like, if you're like, I want to become part of the Thieves Guild, and that's just like, well, we have like, because we have like 3 months between adventures, and that's what you want to do. Like, I want to become part of this society or this or whatever. That would be definitely like a down thing you do in downtime.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, you know, all of these modes do still have that openness that you talked about. It's just that they've like, you know, here's the things that people generally are doing, and these
and that gives you a framework so that you know, let's be honest, not everybody's as creative, and so if somebody comes along, like we said, the thief who wants to steal things to make money, there's the I had this, they have the concept of performing to make money, this is kind of the same. I just got to pick the right skill or something that makes sense to do it. But you had kind of a framework, a scaffolding you could build upon. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's a rule that you can kind of steal from because you understand how it all kind of works together within the system.
Yeah.
Totally. Totally.
So do you have any other questions or?
So the only thing is, so how does, so the encounter, so not the encounter, well, we talked encounter mode, we got the exploration mode, but now when you start talking about wilderness adventures, like sort of long, I'm traveling, hex crawl, for example, kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? So I'm traveling long distances. That would probably be, you'd probably more run that as exploration, even though the time
100%.
frames are larger, you know.
Yeah, but you're generally, when you're traveling, unless it's like on a train, right, where it's like a month journey, then you don't have to worry about it. But like it would be more like exploration, because it's like a hex crawl, right? So it's like,
Yep.
Okay, this day you move this far, so it's in days. It's not in weeks and months. Like overall, it might take you a month to get somewhere. But if you have to kind of make checks, like going into different areas on the map, and that would be definitely exploration.
That's how I read it. But
yeah.
I know there was a little bleed there when you were talking about surviving in the wilderness and just
That's more about like surviving, like you're in a spot
you're
for
caught
3
for
months.
the winter. You got caught in the pass,
exactly.
and you got to survive 6 months until the snow melts, whatever, right?
Yeah, and instead of like, okay, well, let's go through, and like if it's a GM, you want to do that, or maybe roll, like, okay, we'll do this every week or something. Roll maybe if a random encounter happens, but generally you're just trying to like, I'm subsisting.
Right. You're trying to get past the boring stuff and get to something that has there's an interest. If it's interesting that, during that period of time you get attacked by a polar bear, great. You go into counter mode, you do your thing, but, overall you're treating it as something bigger than just every day I'm making a die roll. Just
exactly.
To make a die. Yeah, that's cool.
And that's kind of with like with exploration and downtime, they both kind of, minimize that, like, and obviously in different ways, but like, again, the classic thing that I always think of is like being in a dungeon and having a rogue be like, I search for traps. Okay, I search in this hallway. I search in this hallway. And maybe like they go to a new place and the GM's like, oh, you didn't say you were searching for traps this time. And it's like,
and then there's really old school. Well, you didn't say you were poking it with a pole. So
yeah, exactly. Like exactly. It's like, there has to be, like, we don't have to describe, our characters they're professionals, like they're doing what they're doing. Like,
it assumes they're competent at what they, what they do. So
exactly. So they're just doing that, yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. I mean, that was a really nice description of the different sets. I mean, we spent a lot of time on encounters because those were complicated. These are a little less complicated, but they have, a real natural feel to them. So I think I get it. Makes a lot of sense.
I think Follow the Expert is probably the most unique thing in there that people probably wouldn't be used to, and that kind of can be the most confusing, I guess. But yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. Do you got any other final tips or GM tips or player tips for the game?
I definitely don't have any. I've never GM'd Pathfinder.
Okay.
I've played a bunch, but I've never GM'd it. So I don't have quite any.
And I've only watched a live play that you guys do like 3 times. So
yeah,
and then I played.
You played in a game. Yeah, I mean, there's not really any tips. I mean, I said a lot of these skill feats. There's certainly class feats, and obviously it's mostly like the rogues and the rangers, and maybe I think the investigators or some of the other ones, but mainly rogue and rangers have the most kind of class feats that interact with exploration mode. But there's a ton of skill feats that help with this stuff.
Okay, cool.
And then people often are like, oh, skill feats are so weak, but like they're not huge, but they do modify things in little ways that makes it much like I talked about, like swift sneak or quiet allies, right? That makes those exploration activities easier.
Makes sense. Yep.
Or quick squeeze, or a lot of these little things that you might not seem are big, really help with this style of gameplay.
Very cool.
So definitely, if you find yourself in a lot of exploration modes doing something, then you definitely want to look at the skill feats to see if it modifies them in a better way.
Cool.
I mean, any time that you can get like an extra action to do during exploration is huge. So, like I said, some of the rangers have stuff where they can automatically cover tracks or scout ahead, and still have another action that they can do.
Cool.
So they can be sneaking and scouting.
Awesome. All right. Well, great.
Yeah.
That is a really good description. I appreciate you taking the time again to help everybody and myself. I think I learned something extremely useful. I really want to play more. I really want to play some more Pathfinder.
You got to play more.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate there's not a ton of games out there for Pathfinder. I think a lot of people want to play. There's just not a lot of GMs.
Do I need to learn how to play enough to GM it? I don't know. I don't know.
You gotta play it some more first.
Yeah, I guess so. Hey, I started game mastering D&D back in the day before I ever played because no one played it. So.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So, all right.
We'll talk later. I have some ideas for that, but
yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody for watching. If you like what you heard, do a subscribe, do a like. Again, we're not trying to be famous. It'd just be really cool to see the numbers go up, just for fun. And we'll keep making these really deep videos as well as the other ones that I do. And Eric, again, their knowledge of the rules is always fantastic, and I appreciate you, imparting a little of that knowledge onto me. So.
Awesome. Yeah. Trying to get you in the 2E sphere. So like I said, I love Savage Worlds, but fantasy in that game isn't great. Although I am still working on my little fantasy game for that. But yeah, I really do like 2E, and once like I've now gone back and played 5E, I'm always like, oh, why can't I'm like, oh, I keep forgetting I'm not playing 2E. Like I want to do this, I want to retry, I want to, so I'm always like, damn it, I want to do this other stuff.
Yeah. So you've been spoiled, spoiled, so to speak.
Yeah, I've been spoiled.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, thanks everyone again. I'm Carl with
Eric.
And this is Tabletop Tango, and we will catch you next time. We don't know there was a lot of ideas that were thrown out as next Pathfinder thing. We'll talk about it. We'll figure it out, and then we'll do something because I think there's a lot of scratching the surface, and there's a lot of depth that's to be explored there. So thank you. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you next time.
Bye-bye.